Hi, everyone. Ashley May and Mike Beer here with the Daily Racing Form. Our race of the day this Saturday is the Sam F. Davis out at Tampa Bay Downs. It's their feature race on their 12 race program, and it's an important one with some points on the line. And a lot of horses will use this as potentially a prep race for the Tampa Bay Derby at the beginning of March. Mile and a 16th here on the main track. And Mike, a really nice field of 10 where it looks like, at least on paper, 5 or 6 of them could easily win it.
Yeah, not really sure who the horse to beat is in this race. Actually, I don't know how they're going to bet it. And there are just way too many. There are things to like about just about everybody, and then there are some real questions about those same horses.
We have a lot of horses stretching out, maybe in the fact that they've only tried a one-turn mile to this point in their career, which, as we look at the time form US pace projections, it'll be interesting to see how that affects this race. A fast pace is projected. You can see Camp Hale draws the inside, showed a fair bit of speed on debut, but even last time out at Gulfstream at the one-turn mile, John Hancock, Dr. Ruben M. These are horses that come out of, say, California, or races where they won gate to wire in the case of John Hancock.
Yeah, I mean, listen, certainly Camp Hale, he's got speed from the rail. I'll be very surprised if he can outrun John Hancock to the lead in this race.
And you can see the LP flag is attached to the 7 in here, which is Poster, the winner of the Remsen last year. We'll jump into it here, though, with the number 1, Camp Hale, who he's a maiden facing this bunch, but he has 3 second place finishes on his resume. And Guns Loaded, nice horse that he faced 2 back. The 3rd place finisher came back to win next time out, and maybe his speed helps him a little bit here.
Yeah, if nothing else, again, I don't expect him to make the lead in this race, just considering the speed to his outside, but he's fast and he's handy and he's got the rail. And so I think that's just going to let him fall into a pretty good trip in this race. He hasn't won yet, Ashley. I think he's run really well in all 3 of his starts. He just happened to only be second best last time to a Pletcher first-time starter who happens to be pretty good. I hate taking maidens in races like this, and I'm probably not going to bet this horse, but he's a contender in here.
I mentioned some of the horses that he faced 2 back. Let's not forget 3 back. Patch Adams finished behind him, and there's been some hype supporting that horse out of the Brad Cox barn. The number 2, Treaty of Rome, we'll look at one of his most recent performances. He did try the Macho Man, which is one of Gulfstream's sort of road to start developing points later down the road. Chad's been on a heater at Tampa. Let's just face it. It's a high percentage barn, but extremely high numbers this meet. And I thought he ran really well here. He loses to a horse we already mentioned, Guns Loaded, and he is just really finding his strides, the best ones late. And that has to make you think this distance, 2 turns, is really going to work for him.
He sort of looked like that right from the start. His debut was good. He didn't look like a sprinter at all. He improved when they stretched him out. We just saw the Macho Man. Here's my question for you, Ashley. I'm a fan of this horse. I think he's a major contender in this race too. That race that we just watched, was Treaty of Rome really finishing hard in that race, or was Guns Loaded stopping on the lead at the end of the race? Because my opinion was that Guns Loaded was stopping, and then of course we saw Guns Loaded come back last week at Gulfstream, and he totally bombed in the Holy Bowl.
I think he was stopping, but I also think when you look at how Treaty of Rome was being asked, he just seems like a horse to me that it takes him a while to get going. And that's why I think the 1-turn mile at Gulfstream doesn't suit him well. There's just not enough going. I think the extra turn will help him. And like I said, I just think he needs to be ridden maybe a little bit harder and more aggressively. And if anyone's going to develop these horses and be able to stretch them out, Chad is certainly one of those people. But completely agree with your assessment of Guns Loaded. If you backed him last weekend at Gulfstream Park, obviously not happy with that performance at all. The number 3, John Hancock. This is another one. We've been talking about the Constitutions. They've been ready to roll on debut. That was the case for this colt. And as we look at that performance at Tampa, I feel like in a lot of races, I don't remember Brad Cox horses going straight to the lead on debut and staying in front, but like he wanted the lead and it was easy for him to make it here. And I just think he looks excellent winning.
Yeah, I agree. Just dominated this field right on the front end. This is a really, really strong debut. And I'm not surprised that Brad Cox goes right into a stakes race with him. I'm not really surprised that they stretch him out either. He's a half to a grade 1 winning dirt router. So there's enough to like here. Actually, I would just point out one thing, and it's really, really hard to find bad trainer stats for Brad Cox. He does everything well. He doesn't do this well. Horses that win their debuts sprinting, and then he stretches them out on dirt right in a stakes race. I mean, it's not a huge sample, but these horses really do not win.
And you bring up a good point there, kind of like the benefit of using Formulator, right? You can look at the bottom of your past performances. You see sprinter out, you go, wow, that's great, 37%. You see one last start, 30%. But when you start layering in those other components, that number typically doesn't go northward of those other percentages. It's typically dropping. So great point there with the number 3, John Hancock. The number 4, Dr. Ruben M. I think he's at least worth a talk for a couple of reasons. From a pace perspective, he has speed, and in some of those races, I would call it that typical California speed. And then you look at last time out, he chased in vain throughout there, but I do think the top 2 in there, they're good horses. Coal Battle, I think, is underrated. He was able to kind of stamp himself with following that up with the Smarty Jones. But then you look at Speed King. Speed King looked very good down at Oaklawn Park, winning the Southwest.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add to that. He was in a pretty tough spot last time, and he just wasn't quite good enough. I'm not sure that things get that much easier for him here, Ashley. And there is speed to his inside too, and I think that works against him.
We'll see what he does here. I think he'll offer some value on the board, most definitely more than he did last time out. The number 5, Gateskeeper, another maiden in this field, just like the Rail Runner. This one's a son of Instagram who was second on debut at Oaklawn, then came back at Oaklawn Park, stretched out to a mile, and he was third. In terms of trips, I think he got very similar trips where he's close enough to the action. But for me, at least last time out, I really would have liked to see him kick in more to the wire.
Yeah, not sure what the thinking is really to enter him in this race. If I'm going to take a maiden, though, in the Sam F. Davis, I'm taking the horse on the rail.
The number 6, Owen Almighty, up next. We'll take a look at that most recent performance, which was the kind of the springboard to this, the Pasco. And a lot happened. The stewards had a lot to consider here in this race, and it affects several runners when we look at it. Naughty Rascal, Owen Almighty, very bold. Those kind of top 3 finishers. It's really going to change here. Owen Almighty is going to cross the wire in front, but he's going to be disqualified and placed 5th in this field. And he was a horse that he led throughout in here. And you wonder if maybe kind of having to race off the layoff just got a little tired, got a little wandering, and obviously it cost him a placing.
Yeah, he was justifiably, I guess, DQ'd in there because he really did bother a horse as they entered the far turn of that race. He was also much the best in there. I mean, it's unfortunate for them that they lost that victory because he did all the racing up front. He was way the best at the end of that race, but he did bother a horse on the turn. So I understand why they DQ'd him. It's a real question how far this horse wants to go, actually. I don't question his talent. Every one of his races is good. Even the only loss in the Iroquois, I thought he ran great in there behind a pretty slow pace trying to close, and he'll be more forward this time. I'm not sure he isn't the most talented horse in this field, actually, but we'll see how he does stretching out.
To me, the Iroquois I love. I don't care that he didn't win. He showed something different that he could adapt, right? I'm not saying that he will be sitting 4th in this field early. I think he could be part of the pace, maybe tracking a second, very similar to Timeform US. But I don't want kind of the one-trick pony, the one that has to make the lead, because we know that doesn't necessarily happen in a race like this. So I agree with everything you said. And maybe because of what happened last time out in the Pasco, you do see blinkers will go on him for the first time. The number 7, Poster, this one up next, this one for Owen Hardy. We talked about his chance earlier in one of our previews in the Suncoast. He has a good chance here with this Son of Money. So when we look back at the Remsen last time out, this is a pretty good performance. And the fact that you're taking a horse that's coming out of 2 wins on the grass, trying the dirt for the first time, going to a 1 1/8 miles, and he gets an 83 for this effort.
He ran well in here. He got an overall good trip. This is a good, his first two starts on the turf were really good. And then he obviously transferred over to dirt. You know, listen, he's getting a little tired here and he's drifting out. And by the way, he wins, but he was only second best in there. The horse that went second to him had a lot of trouble on the turn, and it really cost him. I don't think it takes away at all from what Poster did in there. This horse is good, and he's really dangerous in this race.
And it looks like, depending how he performs here and how that goes, he has options, right? He has those turf races under his belt. He doesn't necessarily have to go to the Tampa Bay Derby. There are other races to look at, including the Jeff Ruby and things of that nature, based on the fact that he's been working at Turfway for quite some time and then had that local drill on February 2nd. The number 8, Naughty Rascal. We saw that I got lucky in there. He got placed 2 first in the Pasco. Prior to that, though, was second behind Donut God. It was very speedy, and that was in the inaugural. Very consistent horse, figures to be forward. I just don't know how to assess him here. Is he good enough to win? That's a little tough for me to say.
Yeah, and is he going to be as good stretching out, back out in this race? They did go the 1 turn mile. back in September last year. He didn't run that great in that race. He's been better sprinting so far. He ran fine last time. He did not run as well as Owen Almighty, but he inherited the win.
The number 9, Smoking Boy. Absolutely a wild card in here, coming out of those races in Puerto Rico where he was second on debut. He's blown the competition out of the water in those last two. Was able to clearly stretch out last time out over a muddy surface and just passed a lot of horses early and just kept on cruising. The stable here, Sonata Stables, they do obviously support racing in Puerto Rico and a lot in Florida. I don't know what to do with him. I mean, his workouts, they're fine, but I can't really assess him based on his races down there.
Yeah, who knows how he's going to fit with these horses. I will say, just from the visual of his last 2 wins, this horse can run a little bit. I mean, his win last time in that Group 1, that was a really impressive performance. I mean, he made a huge move on the turn. He blew right by those horses. He kept going. You can understand, too, why the blinkers are going on, because he got the left-hand whip came out a little bit in the stretch there, and he totally shied from it and started running sideways. But he kept going, so the blinkers are going on. I don't know, Ashley. Maybe he's just overmatched by these horses, but I won't be surprised when he's competitive. This horse has looked really good.
And then rounding out the field is the number 10, Very Bold here. Another one for Owen Hardy, who ended up being second last time out in the Pasco. He certainly had the opposite of trips when you look at Owen Almighty, was very forward. This horse was dead last early on. I do think there is a big conversation to have around him if you think the pace is going to be contested, because I do think he will be closing late.
Yeah, we'll see if he can close late on the stretch out here. He looks a little bit like a closing sprinter to me, and those are the worst horses to take stretching out. He also, to me, just didn't really run that well in the Pasco. I mean, they really raced each other in front of him, and I just thought he was picking up pieces at the end.
And you look at his 2-turn race at Turfway Park, it's hard for me to assess. Different surface, and honestly, his turf race wasn't that great, but it was also his debut, so never know what to make of these types. But a great point there on the stretch out. Sprinting types, not necessarily the horses you want to back here at the 2-turn distance. So this is the race of the day this Saturday for the Daily Racing Forum. So do not forget, if you go on the web, you can get free past performances for this race in every race of the day that we offer. Wide open edition here of the Sam F. Davis. And as we transition here to top pick time, curious to see which direction you go in, because when I looked at this, like I said, there's 5 or 6 horses that can win it.
Yeah, I thought this race was really, really tough. And I'm not going to sit there and suggest I have a strong opinion, Ashley. I'm very interested to see how it plays out. I went with Owen Almighty because, again, I think he might be the most talented horse in the race. And if he can stretch out, I think he can beat this field. I'm a big Treaty of Rome fan. I put him second, mostly because I don't love the Mucho Macho Man.
I think the interesting thing here is you will have some live prices underneath. That includes Camp Hale, the maiden in this field in the 4th spot. And then you mentioned the number 9 in here, Smoking Boy. You really don't know what you're getting, and hopefully you get a good price on him in his first start since coming to Florida. I went with Treaty of Rome. I know we talked about guns loaded. How do you assess that? And then how do you assess what he did after that performance where Treaty of Rome was the runner-up? I just think this is the type of horse that needs to go 2 turns. And Chad had success last year in the Tampa Bay Derby. Now he's going to use this race, which he typically doesn't use, as maybe a launching point for that. But a great edition of the Sam F. Davis, 6291 for Mike, 2367 for me. It's race number 11 of 12 on Saturday. Good luck.